Hello and welcome to Vendor Trash. Is the title a reference to my opinions, my drawing skills, or both? That's for you to decide. Attunements used to be quite a contentious aspect of WoW's endgame. They were mostly applied to raids, occasionally to dungeons, and nowadays are practically non-existent. It's easy to understand why they were so reviled by a large portion of the player base. The process quite literally served as a way to gatekeep you from areas of the game that you may wish to engage in. They also made it more difficult for guilds and raid groups to fill their rosters, as not everyone who was skilled enough to bring to a raid could actually zone in. And it made it a royal pain in the rump to ever get your alts into a raid. Thankfully, as the game has shifted more toward account-wide unlocks, the alt concern has become less and less of an issue in attunement-adjacent circumstances. So with the game having an ever greater shift toward more emphasis on the endgame and less on the journey to get there, I cannot really say it'd be good for attunements to come back. That being said, I personally enjoyed them, and I'm a bit sad we don't really see them anymore. So, strange as it may be, even though I think it's objectively correct to steer away from attunements, I'm going to use this video to make arguments for why they were actually pretty dang cool. I mean, I guess that's the thing they do in debate classes, right? Anyway, my major arguments are going to be for the narrative sense of grandeur they add to the raid and to the players working their way into them, the merits of having a convoluted task list to reach your goal, and the sense of prestige and accomplishment it gave players who completed them. Firstly, I believe that attunement quests just added a lot to the weight of the journey players went on to complete them, and as a consequence, the weight of the locations themselves. Obviously, the mere presence of the quest chains adds to the narrative. Now, I'm going to most often refer to TBC attunements as they were the ones I had the most direct experience with. I always found the Karazhan and Black Temple attunements to be particularly satisfying. While the narrative of Karazhan's chain was fairly bare bones, it did involve us interacting with the area outside of the raid, with Medivh's apprentice Khadgar, and even going back in time to the opening of the Dark Portal in the Black Morass dungeon to speak with Medivh himself. It gave us some degree of interaction with the people most familiar with the tower before we actually entered it ourselves. Not to mention that having to go into 4 level 70 dungeons helped test the mettle of the players slightly before they step into the first raid of the expansion. And once you were in the tower, it felt all the more significant for your effort. This place was massive, filled with all sorts of magic, ghosts, and history, and by gosh, you earned your right to be here. Of course, the Karazhan attunement paled in comparison to the big kahuna of the Burning Crusades chains, the Black Temple attunement. The chain was quite lengthy in and of itself, all the more so when you consider how many places it asked you to visit that themselves had attunements to them. The quests here do a lot to familiarize yourself with Akama and the Ash-Tongue Deathsworn, as well as the covert rebellion that they are planning to stage against Illidan to reclaim the once pristine temple, as well as Maeve, whom Akama is allegedly serving as the warden of, but who of course has the same goal, even if she would rather just be set free right away. Along the journey, we encountered the slain Seer Udalo in the Archaic, as well as the living Seer Olam in Serpentine Cavern. The latter had been found out as a traitor and ultimately sacrifices himself so that Akama may maintain his facade of loyalty to Illidan. We ultimately work in tandem with the Shatar to siege the temple. Once we put down the Shade of Akama that tethered the Broken to Illidan, the Ash-Tongues serve as our most trusted allies in the raid, offering their services, including repairs, upgrades to our Medallion of Karabor, and the Shadow Resistance gear to make the Mother Shiraz encounter more doable. Then, once the Illidari Council falls, it is with the aid of his fallen brothers Udalo and Olum that Akama is able to break the final seal to Illidan's location atop the temple. It's a simple story, but a satisfying one to see unravel thanks to your own efforts. Gameplay-wise, aside from the open-world questing, we're required to venture into the Archaic, Serpentine Cavern, the Eye, and the Battle for Mount Highjaw. I regret to say that I wound up doing this quest chain after the attunements on SSC and TK were lifted, so I kind of got to shortcut it, but if you completely expand each prerequisite attunement, you would have also had to venture into Gruul's Lair, the Slave Pens, Karazhan, Escape from Durnhold Keep, the Black Morass, the Botanica, the Mechanar, Shadow Labyrinth, the Steam Vault, and Sethic Halls. Probably more, and I just got my wires crossed here. And let's not forget all of the reputations you had to raise up as well. Getting into Black Temple was a big deal effort-wise, and making it to Illidan himself all the more so. Admittedly, the existence of multiple difficulties has also contributed to the diminishment of big boss gravitas. But you have to admit the legwork that a hefty attunement chain requires you to put in also serves as legwork for the auspiciousness of a raid and raid boss. Certainly more so than just a few leveling quests are capable of pulling off. Secondly, I think having a long list of tasks standing between you and your objective is, generally speaking, very good for the health of the game. Many players, and the game itself, lean heavily into the more action RPG aspects of WoW. Those are all well and good, of course, but this is an MMORPG, and part of that genre's very identity is having a broad swath of busy work. See my video on grinds released not too long ago. And while we still have that, primarily through optional grinds, I say what better place to make us do tons of stuff than in the lead up to the raids, which are essentially the narrative culmination of any given season or expansion. There's a balance to strike, of course, but the game far too often nowadays opts to simply give you access to whatever you want, at least if it's non-cosmetic, with little resistance. If a raid group so chooses, they can literally just drag a player who just hit level cap on their first character and carry them through the current raid. That's not inherently a bad thing, but it does feel a little bit hollow, and attunements, for better or worse, give you a reward to work towards that wasn't just a pet or mount or transmog, or gold to buy pets, mounts, and transmog. You are working toward access. That's a pretty unique motivation nowadays. Possibly the strongest motivation you can actually throw at players. But is it optimal game design? Well, according to Blizzard, only about 1% of players experience Naxxramas in vanilla, which feels like a huge waste of resources, so I'm gonna say no. But, and that brings me to my third point, it was pretty dang impressive to be able to say you were experiencing Naxxramas. As much as I can empathize with FOMO, believe me, I experience it too, there is value in keeping certain aspects of the game very aspirational. Not every player needs access to every bit of the game, anathema though it may be for me to say. Seeing or hearing about something cool in WoW and realizing that you either won't get it for a long time or are going to have to work darn hard to get it is, I believe, a good thing. Lots of players felt that recently with the expansion-wide meta achievements. I know I felt it last expansion with the Elite PvP set for Warriors, and it got me to progress Arena on a class I'd never PvP'd on before. As a mount collector, I miss having a mount collecting achievement to work towards, which I haven't had since Warlords of Draenor. Instead, I, am constantly sitting at double the highest current achievement. It's similar to the effect seeing vanilla players in tier gear had on new players. Yeah, you're not ready for that awesome looking armor now, but put in the work, get good, and maybe one day you will be. Transmog kind of ruined that, even if I think it's 99% an improvement to the game. And of course, on the other side of it, it feels pretty dang good when other players admire you or are somewhat dependent on you. Is it a fragile ego thing? Maybe. But I also think it's just human nature, and not altogether a bad sensation to crave. Knowing that you're part of a mere subset of players who can even zone into this dangerous raid? Well, that's sure to make you feel pretty baller. Heck, it could even, to an extent, help secure your place on a raid team because you couldn't be replaced at the drop of a hat. Which you could argue is a bad thing, but I think it was fine given that encounters were designed to be easier back then. Also, there was a certain kind of attunement that existed, keys, that didn't strictly keep you from zoning into a raid, but which opened gates or doors in front of the instance portals. These were innately less necessary as really only one person around, not even necessarily someone in the raid group, needed to have the key. But hey, it made you feel important and valued. A similar example that's still relevant to this day, although rarely, is being able to unlock the secret boss, Yor, in Mana Tombs, on 2 of my characters. It's a bit of a lengthy quest chain that nobody today would really deem worth their time, or are even really aware of, but it's a thing only a few of us can do, and I feel at least a little special unlocking his prison during TBC time walking. I mean, he's a very easy boss and not out of the way, so don't worry, I'm just giving everybody 10 extra badges and a 1 in 4,000 shot at the Time Reaver mount. And those are the basic reasons that I loved attunements. They are mostly just a vanilla and TBC thing, with the Onyxia attunement chain being perhaps the most famous among them all. And ultimately, they were mostly phased out after that. Some of the last attunements I can think of were Silver Proving Grounds to access heroic dungeons in WoD, and Court of Stars and Archway being rep locked at the start of Legion. Maybe there were others, but they're pretty scarce either way. And while, again, I mostly agree with Blizzard's decision to move away from them, I, as an individual, kind of yearned to have those obtuse requirements back. I thought they were pretty dang fun. For this week's drawing, I decided to go with a comma. Because again, while Onyxia definitely has the most infamous attunement chain, I had much more experience with the Black Temple one. And Akama is pretty much the main guy orchestrating us getting in there. And generally, I like Akama as a character. I mean, he's not super thoroughly explored or all that deep, really. But I do appreciate that come Legion, he was willing to work with the Illidari. I feel it added some nuance to his character. At least if you chose Altruist earlier, if you chose Cain, you basically just force him into it. Or his shade, I guess. But really, much more so than his personality, I think he just has an awesome design. Like the decayed face, the dual scythes, the black hood, you gotta love it. Unfortunately, I think I made him look a bit too tall. I preferred the slightly stouter version we get in-game, but it's close enough for my standards. Now, I had already used the Black Temple for the Illidan drawing a way back, so I just went with Shadow Moon Valley instead. And obviously I could have stuck him in the Warden's cage where he spends most of his time, but that's just a cage in a hole, so I decided instead to stick him above ground in the midst of some Dranic ruins, with the Hand of Gul'dan, the zone's centerpiece, in the background, and some of that epic skybox with the constantly falling meteors in it. Though I'm gonna be honest, Shadow Moon Valley is not one of my favorite zones to be in. As I surely touched on in my zone discussion video for the Burning Crusade, it's Hellfire Peninsula, but green, and not a green that is easy on the eyes. So as I say way too often, not my favorite zone, but I appreciate it for what it is. So then, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next week. Provided, of course, you complete the attunement and earn access to next week's video. Bye-bye!